Is synthetic phonics really the best way to teach children to read? Have its supporters won the reading wars? That's our talking point. Hello and welcome to Talking Point. Once phonics was a dirty word, but not anymore, particularly in its synthetic form. Politicians see it as the way to raise literacy standards. The Education Secretary, Ruth Kelly, says it should be taught fast and first. David Cameron says we need concrete action to enforce the use of synthetic phonics. But some teachers say it puts children off reading, and starting formal education too soon damages them. At stake is how the next generation will learn to read. Saber Malik reports.
You may think that teaching a child how to read should be as straightforward as ABC, but in fact the whole issue of which reading method to use and how successful it is has become rather mixed up. Amongst educationists, politicians, parents and employers, the consensus that the ability to read was the key to achievement led to literacy being put firmly on the educational and political agenda. The National Literacy Strategy was introduced in 1998, and in recent years the Department of Education has attributed improvements in reading to the strategy. In 1997, 67% of 11-year-olds achieved the expected level for their age in reading. The latest figures claim that this now stands at 84%. But critics say that this figure is still not acceptable. It needs to be higher. They point towards phonics as the solution, but it's certainly not a new solution. In the 1960s, phonics was used as the main method of teaching. In the 1970s, the system fell out of favour and was replaced by other methods. In the 1990s, phonics made a comeback, but in conjunction with other practices. Into the 21st century, the debate has moved on again. The questions now being asked are how much time should be dedicated to phonics and what kind of phonics, analytic or synthetic. So what is the difference between analytic and synthetic phonics? Well, in a nutshell, in analytic phonics, children are taught to break down words into their constituent parts. So the word street becomes str, eat. Compare this to synthetic phonics, where children taught individual sounds which they then blend. So the word street is s, t, r, e, t. At the request of the government, Jim Rose, a former Ofsted director, has undertaken a review of reading strategies. His interim report, published in December last year, came down in favour of synthetic phonics.
The most important thing is to teach phonics thoroughly, systematically on a regular basis, and that's really what synthetic phonics gives the edge over if you're looking at the whole range of possibilities for teaching phonics.
And it's synthetic phonics under the commercial programme of Jolly Phonics that is taught at the Riverview School in Surrey, and in line with the Rose Report's recommendations that the teaching of phonics should be introduced by the age of 5, that method is being used for younger children.
Lollipop, good. Can I hear you do it on your own?
Because Jolly Phonics is such an active, enjoyable scheme, we can actually start in nursery and we use it with all the songs and the actions and drama and props, and so we found that from the second term of nursery we can introduce children to the sounds.
But others feel that synthetic phonics is too prescriptive and puts children off reading.
They are really reading in rather a robotic way, and we really want children to enjoy reading and to become readers, lifelong readers. Our view is that there shouldn't be one way of teaching children to read. Children's learning styles are different, their needs are different.
Supporters of phonics claim that its benefits can be seen amongst pupils of all abilities, not just the most literate.
On the whole, the bottom group comes more into the average, and it enables the boys to do as well as the girls, children in poor areas to do as well as other children who are in not such impoverished areas, children who haven't got English, even children with special needs, autistic and so on. They learn much more easily this way.
There is some ambiguity as to whether the interim Rose report recommends the use of phonics exclusively or with supplementary methods. It says that although phonic work is an essential part, it is not the whole picture of reading, that it should be set within a broad and rich language curriculum. For some, a 7-year study carried out in Clackmannanshire in Scotland is proof that synthetic phonics is indeed the holy grail of reading. The study claimed that children taught this way were 7 months ahead of their peers by the end of their second year and 3 years ahead by the age of 11. But these findings are disputed.
The Clackmannanshire report was a very, very small-scale report. They did it over a long period of time, but they didn't even have a control group because they started to think, oh, this is a jolly good idea, so they switched everybody to doing it. That's the first thing that went wrong there. The second thing was that they actually mixed and matched their methods. Even though they say it's synthetic phonics, they use things like, a lot of the schools use the Oxford Reading Scheme, and that relies quite heavily on analytic phonics. The idea that somehow or other we found the solution seems to me very implausible. I mean, it's something that politicians like, but it's not something that actually is, you know, there's no evidence base for it at all.
Well, I get the impression really that people like Ruth Kelly, Lord Adonis, David Cameron, David Willits, me, we're all in favour of what works, and the evidence shows that this works. And I don't think it's become a party political football if both the Labour and Conservatives are in favour of this. And I'd like to see ideology taken out of education policy and replaced with what works.
And we'll soon see what works for Jim Rose when he publishes his final report. It seems unlikely that his conclusion will be the final word in the debate on phonics.
Zeba Malik reporting. Well, let's meet our practitioners. Dr. Dominique Wise, you lecture in early years of primary education at the University of Cambridge. Now, given that figure that we saw, that almost 20% of children leave primary school with inadequate literacy skills, do you see teaching synthetic phonics fast and first as addressing that failure?
Not really on its own, no. I mean, I think it's one very important part of learning to read. Nobody doubts that. But the danger is with this debate, we will enter into an imbalance and we'll have far too much phonics, and that's my real worry. And the research picture is quite clear that phonics has a necessary and important part to play, but it's limited, and there are lots of areas that phonics is not particularly helpful in.
That's a good start. Ruth Miskin, you've taught reading for many years, and in fact you devised your own synthetic phonics programme. Why have you concentrated on that one technique?
I haven't just focused on that one technique, but I have focused on that one technique so that we get all of our children reading very early, but it is there to serve one purpose alone, as you're saying, and that's to get the children decoding text really early, really efficiently, so that then they can put all their energies into comprehending what they're reading and get so much more fun out of their reading more quickly, so more effectively.
Decoding comes first by your system?
Decoding comes first to work out what words are, but actually to enjoy books, to enjoy literature, children are also listening to lots of stories, learning poems off by heart. So I don't want this debate to be, oh, it's either you listen to lots of good stories or you learn to read. It's a false debate that. What we're trying to do is to get children to learn quickly and to make sure all of them learn to read. We cannot risk one child. And in all the years I've been teaching reading, as a head teacher as well, and while I've been devising this programme, is that I know that we can get every child, well, every healthy child, to learn to read more effectively using a very simple, fun method of teaching reading. It's got to be fun.
And you said this debate has got to be productive. In fact, Jim Rose, who Zeba Malik mentioned there, warned in his interim report, his full report's due out any day now, but he warned against having a futile debate, which is why it's so important to hear from practitioners. Now, Katie Kowalska, you are an early years teacher at a primary school. You've got experience of reception and year one. What's your reaction to the idea of phonics going fast and first?
I think it's too early to start for many children. For some children it's fine to teach children through the phonics in reception or early years, but for some children it doesn't work. They're not ready for it, and I think there is a danger of some children getting switched off books before they've even started. I think you need to do what works for the child, and children are individuals.
Is that your experience?
Yes.
Well, let's hear from another practitioner, Debbie Hepplewhite. You're also a teacher in a primary school. You're currently manager of a special needs unit, but you also have experience of reception years. What's your feeling about synthetic phonics, fast and first, and for beginner readers?
I think that people don't realise how effective it is until they've used it and they've used it properly. And what
so you're
worries
suggesting
me,
that Katie's not using it properly?
possibly, and no one likes to admit that. But what worries me at the moment is that Jim Rose, who I think is doing an excellent job to move this along, he's sort of pointing out that people do argue amongst themselves, or there's this type of phonics and that type of phonics. And that is raising the issue of make it embarrassing to talk about the details of what the differences are. So, for example, does everyone really understand what analytic phonics is and synthetic phonics? And my experience of colleagues and other teachers I meet is that no, they don't know exactly what we're talking about. And until such time as everybody is armed with good information about what we are talking about, they're not in a position to really make a choice. So I uphold that teachers need to make their own informed choices, but therefore they need to be informed well.
Well, that suggests that all this is moving a little bit too fast. We're going to have a revised primary literacy strategy in September of this year. All the signs are that it's going to prioritise synthetic phonics. Is the research there to back that up, Dominique?
No, not really. And I think it is moving far too quickly. In fact, I think the interim Rose report, frankly, shouldn't have been advocating synthetic phonics. And I think there's a potentially very damaging impact from that if the final report confirms what the interim report said. The research is very clear. It does make a distinction between analytic and synthetic phonics, and there's absolutely no difference in the effect sizes for those different methods. In fact, all phonics instruction that's been measured in proper studies has shown to have an impact, but on word decoding and word attack skills in particular. Where it's not good is in terms of comprehension. So Jim Rose is not actually reflecting the research picture properly. And in fact, the DFES has just released a funded piece of research that's looked at the difference between analytic and synthetic phonics and has looked at the question of phonics and has concluded that there is no difference statistically between the different methods. But the Rose report, of course, is going to advocate that we have more synthetic phonics.
Ruth Miskin.
The key point there, though, is that what is the difference between synthetic and analytic phonics? That the issue that's coming out with Jim Rose is what is effective phonics. Now, if you don't teach phonics, if you don't teach systematic, intensive phonics, what are you going to teach instead of that, Dominic?
Yeah, well, I'm not advocating that you don't
Right.
teach phonics, am I?
Right.
So what I'm
Okay.
advocating is
can
that
I
we
just
actually have
finish?
an appropriate approach to phonics based on research,
Right.
not one that's led by politicians
Can
and
I
political
want
groups.
Debbie will come in on the research, but can I just say that the key point that you made there that I really agree with is that phonics is only there to work out what a word is. It does not even attempt to try and work out what does this word mean. So my children, say when I was working in Tower Hamlets and all my children were learning English as their second language, they would work out the word. Say the word was adversity, they'd come across it and they'd go adversity, adversity. And that they'd say, what is adversity? And I'd say, well, actually, adversity, we say adversity. And then I would tell them what it means. The key thing here is that my children could say, what does this word mean? Because they could read the word. Children who can't read don't even know the word exists in the first place to actually ask what the word means. And all the work that Stanovich has done is to say that children's vocabulary growth comes through learning to read from whatever background you come from. Now, the research that Greg Brooks has just come out with recently has already been, it's researchers arguing, you see, and now we've got Diana McGuinness's research that's actually arguing totally against what Greg Brooks has said, Debbie.
Yes, if I can explain, research is difficult. You have to research the research and look into it very detail. We need to look at the detail. And what she's pointing out is that the Torgerson-Brooks-Hall research is not comparing like with like. And so they're trying to make a sweeping statement about synthetic phonics, but they're using studies which are very varied. So it might be one-to-one tutoring. There are the classroom studies, because we are in the argument about what should we do in classrooms. The classroom studies are very, very clear that synthetic phonics is the best by far.
No, sorry, I have to answer that. No, there are 20 randomly controlled trials. These are phonics instruction studies. I've just finished 3 months analysing this, and I've actually looked at every single study in this report that you're talking about from the DFES. They are classroom studies, actually, and they're quite clear that in a very rigorous methodology they've used, they've only allowed randomly controlled trials. There is no difference between analytic and synthetic phonics approaches. And frankly, that's one of the most detailed cases ever put on the basis of research, and I stand by that much more than anecdotal evidence.
Katie, what advice would you give to the DFES or to Jim Rose if you were given the opportunity?
Oh, well, I would ask him to, first of all, come into a reception class and spend more than just 20 minutes in there and actually see what teachers are having to do, because teachers want to do what's best for the children.
Because we have two enthusiasts here.
Yes.
So what are your...
I think phonics has got certainly a place in teaching children to read, along with any other method that works for the individual child. And many children, before they hit year 1, are too young. They're not ready for some of the teaching that teachers are having or being told to deliver.
Do you agree, Ruth?
Well, I think we have to be really careful about what we mean by like other methods. I mean, having come from what I used to describe myself as an eclectic teacher of reading,
Yes.
and I would do some phonics, and I do a little bit of look and say, and I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I did it all with masses of enthusiasm. You know, I was always quite full on. But I think, you know, what do we mean by all those other methods? And I know that, if, you know, from all of the youngest children, if they can be equipped with basic, I mean, if we're just taking some of these letters here, that they do actually know the 44 sounds and they can respond to these really quickly. We're talking about 20 minutes a day playing with letters, so they actually do know the letters. They can make these letters into words.
I'm not disputing the phonic teaching. I'm saying that some children are too young, and that taking this into reception classes is, I don't think, is a good idea.
Kate, can I ask you, would you, because it is a problem for me as well. I reckon in every reception class, there's 2 or 3 children who find it hard, whatever system you use. Now, my problem is, those 3 children will get...
There are probably more than 2 or 3, in my experience.
Okay, well,
but yes.
Well, say like 2 or 3. Well, in my experience, I've come across 2 or 3 each time. I know that within a term, with intensive one-to-one teaching, I can get those children to do some basic sound blending, and I know I can get them there. But the point...
But why do they need to be there so young?
No, my question to you is, just say that we didn't do it with those 3 children, because I'm always grappling with this myself. If you didn't do it with those 3 children, do you mean that you don't think it's right to do it with the rest, all those 3, or those 5 in your case?
I think
that's an issue, isn't it?
It is, but I think we're still doing it too young. There are some children in the reception class that I teach in that had no problems with reading and are ready for comprehension work, discussion, talking about books, reading stories, and are fine and actually don't have a problem with the phonics. There are some children for whom phonics is very useful because it gives them a key into reading straight away, and they get the esteem from being able to, self-esteem builds from being able to read, you know, a couple of pages in a book or some of the simple reading scheme books. And there are some children who are just switched off. They don't want to sit there on the carpet and listen. They don't want to, you know, point to the letters. They're still struggling. I mean, it's the same kind of issue as writing, I think. I mean, how can you ask a child to write their name if they can't actually hold their own weight on a climbing frame?
Well, that does suggest that perhaps teachers are being too prescriptive in the way they're teaching it. I mean, one of Zaber's witnesses said it leads to a robotic form of teaching. Is that because it's not being properly taught?
Can I just explain then? I think it's really important to say what synthetic phonics is and isn't and how it compares with what's going on already. First of all, synthetic phonics is incredibly easy. We have got a very complex writing system, which is why in English-speaking countries there's so much difficulty, so much illiteracy, so much so-called dyslexia. Synthetic phonics starts with what works, and instead of using a variety of methods, it's saying, here is the alphabetic code. We're going to start from the simplest way of doing it. Now, analytic phonics starts with some pretty tricky words which are taught as shapes. Here are some flashcards, and we're going to teach you that these shapes are these words. And straight away, we cause failure for children. We also say, right, here are some letters, let's give them their names, let's give them the sounds. So we give them double information about the letter shapes.
But and one of the early learning goals is to say the name and the sound.
Well, yes, and this is why we need to look at the details. And you know, I really feel very sorry that people are rubbishing the arguments and the debates. What happens is that only certain people are debating, and we need to take that debate to ordinary teachers who are actually doing the doing. And that's where my interest and my passion is, and why I'm here to support this programme today.
Other critics suggest that predicting or inferring or problem solving is not helped by synthetic phonics. Am I right?
And I think prediction and inferring is a very important part of the reading process. In terms of the debate about phonics, It's certainly true that children do need to know how to decode, and they have to be taught how to decode. They need to be taught the phonemes. But they do also need to use knowledge of context in the end, because if you take my example I like is the word READ. Now, in one sentence that's read, in another sentence it's read, and it's highlighted, I think, most amusingly in the Centre for Reading in Reading. So that phoneme right in the middle of that word changes according to the context, and that's the case, as we all know, for lots of words. So context is really important, and I think there is a danger.
After they can read it, though, Dominic,
Yes.
they've actually read the word. Say the child comes across the word, and they've read, and they put in read instead of read or read instead of read. They will self-correct because of the context. Now, what?
It's not a simple linear development.
No, it
actually,
isn't.
it's not before and after. That question has not been answered.
No.
No.
However, the government is powering on with this, and as Nick Gibbs suggested in that film, there seems to be a cross-party consensual view that synthetic phonics is the way ahead. Indeed, the Education Secretary presumably would not have said what she has recently said if she didn't expect the interim report would talk up synthetic phonics in the way that I think Ruth and Debbie approve of, and the way that I know you and Katie are very resistant of. However, it does suggest that you've lost this battle.
No, certainly not. And it really does need teachers and parents to stand up and say, no, we will not have more prescription, and we won't have prescription on the basis of a lack of evidence. And I think the Rose Report needs to step back and frankly needs to present a balanced and appropriate way forward. It ties into a number of initiatives that government are involved in education. The review of the literacy strategy has been doing over hastily, and the Rose Inquiry is being done over hastily.
Yes.
Let's please have some measured debate and a long-term discussion.
I'd like to hear from Ruth, because we haven't heard from her for a while. Does your approach suggest that teachers can't be trusted to teach as they see fit in the classroom they're in?
I think it's really hard because teachers have all come through some teacher training establishment. And it's what we've all got such a mixed range of knowledge about teaching reading. I mean, I've come through since I was trained from 1977, and I have been through so many different methods of teaching reading. And so it depends what we mean by professionalism. It means that at certain times in my career, I have learnt something new which has helped me teach better. So now, when I actually discovered, through lots of other people, that actually teaching children to read through a very simple method, it's really fun. Please don't think that phonics is dull and boring. Can we talk really effectively, really quickly? If you knew that would work, and it did work for me, you're going to grasp it with both hands. However, if I say Dominic was teaching now, and I said to Dominic, look, Dominic, this synthetic phonics really does work. I'm telling you, from the government, you are going to do it as from Monday. The thing is, Dominic wouldn't want to do it.
Are you talking about Dominic, or are you talking about the teaching
I'm talking about the
professional?
teacher. I'm talking about him in his example, though, because everything's individualised in the end. And same to Katie. What this government's got to be very careful about is actually telling people what they've got to be. They've got to be convinced to want to do it, because nothing works if you... Look, none of this synthetic phonics, no phonics will actually work unless you put your heart and soul into it, and it's actually going to be effective and you believe it is. Now, I know it works, and all the teachers I work with know it works, but we're converts to this. We get fantastic success from it. But, we've got to win hearts and minds, as well as a government just telling people, you've got to do it, because for the last 10 years, teachers have been told time and time again, do this, do this, do this. And they keep saying, yes, we'll do this, yes, we'll do this. But teachers are actually fed up, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Of actually being told. So here we've got, I think, a fantastic opportunity now to make a massive difference. And what scares me is that teachers might not want to do it, and their heads might not want to do it.
Debbie, that suggests the national literacy strategy is a mistake.
It is, and can I explain why? First of all, I find it extraordinary that Dominic is talking about a lack of evidence. Now, the whole point of the debate about synthetic phonics, it's been brought through evidence, and that's through research evidence and through classroom findings. And it's been the National Literacy Strategy has been so strongly challenged because there was no evidence with which to push forwards the National Literacy Strategy. Now, phonics is not new. Phonics is extremely old, and research is really quite old as well. And so people who've pushed forward for synthetic phonics have been challenging the government for having a total lack of testing of the programmes. Now, the reason that phonics has now been agreed across parties is because behind the scenes, over the last few years, there has been an increasing amount of phonics. But when the National Literacy Strategy Framework was drawn up, phonics was a pathetic amount spread over 3 years, and there was so much criticism. They brought in a phonics programme. That phonics programme was a very weak phonics programme.
Well, it's not been tested, so it's not been evaluated.
It has not been
I presume
evaluated.
you mean progression in phonics.
Exactly.
Not
and
been
so
evaluated.
what happened was, behind the scenes, we evidence-based people, let's not even call us synthetic phonics people, let's call us evidence-based people, have been challenging and challenging and challenging, and we've called upon old research and we've called upon new research. But what we've also done, Dominic, is looked at the detail of what the National Literacy Strategy was actually promoting, and what it's been promoting is what's called balanced literacy or mixed methods, which includes a lot of methods called whole language, which has absolutely been shown by research to fail children. And can I just say, just to finish this off, that what's very important is that where you're talking about you need context and you need other things, and you've talked about other methods, actually the dominant methods for reading strategies amounts to guessing from pictures, guessing from the first letter, and sort of guessing from the context. Now, when it's guessing words, that's
Dominic,
not acceptable.
That sounds as if the National Literacy Strategy is up your street.
Well, I was beginning to agree with you when you started talking about the difficulty in applying evidence to the literacy strategy, and that's been the basis of my work over a number of years, questioning the claim that the literacy strategy is informed by evidence. However, the evidence supporting phonics is not as straightforward as you suggest.
We're going to have to close. So I'm wondering if you can all agree on one thing. Katie suggested that Stuart Rose should go back to reception classes. Jim Rose, I beg your pardon, not Stuart Rose, Jim Rose. Are you confident that this report is going to be received with happiness?
No, and I think the one thing we might...
You would say no. What would you say?
I think it's contradictory. On the one hand, they're saying you must do this. On the other hand, they're saying individual learning, and I'm not sure the two match up.
Ruth?
Well, I'm hoping if the final report is like the interim report, I'm going to welcome it with open arms.
And that is where we have to end this talking point. My thanks to all our guests for joining in this debate, Katie Kowalska and Dominic Wise, and Debbie Hebblewhite and Ruth Mishkin. The Rose Report on the teaching of early reading is due out any day now. The primary literacy strategy will kick in September, the new one. The debate, as you've heard, is live and continuous. Talking Point will be back at the end of the month with more debate and argument. Till then, goodbye.